It's Friday. Finally tonight, notable quotables.
Hopefully we'll have a meeting on the 12th.
Doesn't happen June 12th, it could happen thereafter.
The summit is on track, maybe not for June 12th.
It's probably likely to be delayed.
The process will begin on June 12th in Singapore.
You'll see plenty of aluminum steel around. It'll just be made by American hands.
Not really the great vacation that I was looking for, but we're still together.
I would like to apologize to my wife for the hell she has had to go through the past 2 days.
Can you tell me what the administration has done and will do to prevent these senseless tragedies?
There is nothing that could be more terrifying for a kid to go to school and not feel safe.
They gave up 2 lives for their country, the one they were living and the one they would have lived.
I'm fine. I'm worried about all the people out there who don't have a circle of friends.
I cannot allow those forces to continue to cause pain and difficulty to the people that I love.
Every time it rains hard, you say Hail Mary and hope it's not the time. And here we are. It was time.
It's just nothing to fool with.
There are lots of really good lawyers in the country. He could have picked someone else.
Say it. Say impeachment, sweetheart. Just say it.
Have you ever thought of being impeached? If I had that face, if I had that head of hair, I would have been president so long ago.
The president? Really? I never quite saw this.
Do I have social skills? I don't know. I have social media, that's for sure. We talked about almost everything. We talked about a lot.
1 week. That's it for this special report. Fair, balanced, and unafraid. The story hosted by my friend Martha starts right now. Martha.
Hey there, Brett. Thank you so much. Well, it is back on as the president does diplomacy in the West Wing and a remarkable 8-day 180. In just over a week, we have gone from this letter from the president, quote, sadly, based on the tremendous anger and open hostility displayed in your most recent statement, I feel it is inappropriate at the time to have this long-planned meeting, which led to this mocking from Nancy Pelosi and others.
And when he got this letter from the president saying, okay, never mind, he must be having a giggle fit right there now in North Korea.
So who's giggling now? Stunning development this afternoon on the lawn at the White House after the president walked the North Korean vice chairman back to his car. You don't see that every day.
We're going to be June 12th. We'll be in Singapore. I never said it goes in one meeting. I think it's going to be a process. But the relationships are building. I look forward to the day when I can take the sanctions off of North Korea. I don't even want to use the term maximum pressure anymore because I don't want to use that term because we're getting along. You see the relationship. We did discuss that, the ending of the Korean War. Can you believe that we're talking about the ending of the Korean War? A letter was given to me by Kim Jong-un, and that letter was a very nice letter. Oh, would you like to see what was in that letter? I haven't opened it. I didn't open it in front of the director. I said, would you want me to open it? He said, you can read it later. I may be in for a big surprise, folks.
Oh, okay. Let's get reaction from Guy Benson, townhall.com political editor and Fox News contributor. Howie Kurtz is here tonight, Fox News media analyst, and Zach Pecanis, former senior Democratic National Committee advisor and former senior campaign aide to Hillary Clinton. There was a lot in that soundbite that we just put together from today. The potential end of the Korean War, the potential for denuclearization, a thaw between these two countries. A lot happened, Guy, in that meeting this afternoon.
It did, and it seems like that cancellation that you referenced, where it was off for a couple days, was maybe a good, healthy reality check for everyone involved, including at the White House, because I think there was some triumphalism and a bit too much excitement and optimism flying around. And then there was a reminder that this is actually a very difficult process with a really terrible regime with a horrible history. And the tone that we've seen from the president and the White House ever since has been more measured, in my view, more realistic. And it seems like some of the actual diplomatic groundwork is starting to happen for this June the 12th meeting. So that may have been a pivot point in this process, and one that turns out to be good.
We will see. As the president likes to say, Zach, a lot of tittering and snickering. That Nancy Pelosi soundbite was just one of the examples. So what are folks on the Democratic side saying about it now?
Look, I mean, I think this is great. I think that diplomacy is far superior to war. But I think that everyone should be sounding a note of caution that was expressed by the Republican leader today. You know, Donald Trump seems very eager to get a deal. And so we want to make sure that in his eagerness, he is not accepting something that does not meet the standard that he himself and his administration have laid out, which is verifiable, complete, irreversible denuclearization, along with a verification regime that is stronger than the Iran deal and that goes long into the future. If he comes back from this June 12th summit and does not have an agreement like that, if it just comes back with more excuses or a symbolic end to the Korean War.
Well, he said today, though, Zach, to be fair, that he expects there will be several meetings. And, you know, we remember Reagan and Gorbachev and Glasnost, you know, that it took several meetings.
No,
so
he's
saying
already
this is
making
step
excuses.
number one.
No, he's already making excuses, and I think this is something we need to walk out.
You think that's fair, Zach?
No, I absolutely. Look, we're talking about somebody who has said and that he is the great deal maker.
So do you hope, Zach, hold on, do you hope that he comes home with a deal that promises the things that you just talked about?
Oh, absolutely. Okay. Absolutely. Right. And I think that he
so
owes
why
it
is
to
it
the
so
American
difficult
people.
for both sides to be positive and sort of cheering this process on in the hopes that it's a very good thing for the people of North Korea and South Korea and Japan, rather than knocking it down at every chance you get?
We are thrilled about it, but people are saying that the meeting itself is some sort of accomplishment when the regime has been asking for a meeting at this level.
The president just said it's step number one.
The meeting at this level has been asked for by the regime for years. Accepting this meeting is not some sort of achievement; it's a concession to the Kim regime.
But look, there's also a difference between what you just said, which is excuse making, and expectations management. I think this is more the latter, and that's appropriate.
Yeah. Howie?
Yeah, we can't criticize the president for making excuses for a meeting that hasn't even begun. And by the way, Donald Trump is a master showman. So you had cameras trained on the White House for hours today, the letter being delivered, what was in the letter. And when he did cancel the meeting, there was all of this criticism about, oh, he's just throwing a temper tantrum. This was impulsive. What he did was he got Kim back to the negotiating table. And even in that breakup letter, he did say, you know, call me, write me, text me.
In less than 24 hours, we should point out. I mean, in less than 24 hours, they were saying, actually, we would like to come talk to you, and we do want to have a meeting.
Yeah, and all the criticism about the president wanted this summit so badly that he was going to make sweeping concessions. Actually, what we learned through these negotiating tactics and even the cancellation is that Kim really needs the meeting more. And he's the one who seemed to come back forcefully.
I look forward to the deal.
Yeah, it's going to be fascinating to watch this play out. The president was enjoying the back and forth today with the press, as he often does. And as he was walking away, he got asked about NAFTA. And here's what he said about that.
All of these countries, including the European Union, they charge 5 times the tariff. We don't charge tariffs, essentially. They charge 5 times what we charge for tariffs. And I believe in the word reciprocal. You're going to charge 5 times, we're going to charge 5 times. That hasn't been done. No other president ever brought it up. And it's going to be done now.
So this is fascinating, and it got a lot of response from our partners. This from Emmanuel Macron, who we just saw that, you know, great buddy meeting at the White House with. His response was a little bit frosty, and in fact, he said economic nationalism leads to war. That is exactly what happened in the 1930s. And then this from our northern neighbor, Justin Trudeau. Watch.
The idea that, you know, our soldiers who had fought and died together on the beaches of World War II, in the mountains of Afghanistan, and have stood shoulder to shoulder in some of the most difficult places in the world, that are always there for each other, somehow this is insulting to them. The idea that we are somehow a national security threat to the United States is quite frankly insulting and unacceptable.
Guy, what do you think?
Yeah, because the excuse that the Trump administration is making is using this national security exception to justify the tariffs that they're slapping on the Canadians. Look, this is a terrible, terrible idea. Trade wars are bad for everyone involved. They are lose-lose propositions, as I've said on this show before, because it happens to be true. I hope people go home and go on YouTube and watch Milton Friedman on this, because he's really smart. The thing that's also, to me, so frustrating about this, Martha, is we had such an amazing jobs report today. The economy is booming under Trump policies.
But Guy, the market didn't even blink. You know,
Yeah, well,
the
market is different than the broader economy. And when you cost American jobs through retaliation, because we're going to see retaliation, our allies have promised it, even if you want to grant that, let's say, China is a currency manipulator and a bad trade partner, we're in the process of negotiating with the Chinese. Why would you target our allies in the EU and Canada and Mexico?
I mean, President Trump would say because these countries, you know, charge 5 times to us what we charge to bring their goods into our country. And I think, you know, let me just, I think when you look at this, Zach, and let me get your thought on this, what he's trying to do is push the ball a little bit, you know, just a little bit down the lane to, if he gets a little bit back, a little bit better deal, I think that's probably a starting point that he might be interested in.
Well, look, they started this segment talking about this may start a war. I think the war that Donald Trump needs to worry about is the war within his own party. We have Republicans that are screaming about this, like Paul Ryan, Rep. Kevin Brady, Senator Alexander, Senator Toomey, Senator Ben Sasse. These are all that have come out and said this is a terrible idea. And the reason is that these policies are going to hurt Trump voters. We're talking about auto jobs, farm jobs, textile jobs. These are the people that are going to get hurt by the policies that Donald Trump is pushing through.
So, Howie, what do you think? Wise move or a big mistake for President Trump?
What the Washington establishment fails to understand about this unconventional president is that when he makes these very aggressive moves, even against our allies, it is part of his negotiating style. It's like an opening bid. He did this in real estate. Granted, it's much harder to do it on the world stage. In the end, I predict he will back off to some degree. He'll declare victory. There won't be a trade war. But meanwhile, as you say, he's moving the ball. Because if you take a very rough position, even with your friends, that gives you room to ultimately make a deal.
And then Larry Kudlow saying it's not a trade war, it's a trade discussion. It's an argument among family members. So we'll see. Thanks, you guys. Great conversation. Good to see all of you tonight. Thanks for being here. So still ahead, 2 days before the students of Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High School are set to graduate, we talked to 2 seniors about how they plan to honor their friend.
I will be putting on my cap like a picture of her to make sure that she is walking that stage with me because this is her big day.
Plus, James Comey gets grilled by prosecutors over his former deputy at the FBI, who could soon face criminal charges for lying to federal agents. The Washington Examiner's Byron York next on that.
This is a democracy, and I sincerely think that we are the guardians of that.
When was the last time you talked to Andrew McCabe?
Probably a month ago.
What do you think of what happened to him?
I'm conflicted. I think he is a great person and public servant. I feel pain for him and his family. At the same time, though, I think the Inspector General's report and that process shows people, I hope it shows people, this is what an organization committed to the truth and accountability looks like.
Tonight, James Comey back on the hot seat because federal prosecutors are now interviewing the former FBI director today as part of the investigation into his former deputy, Andrew McCabe. They appear to be considering criminal charges against McCabe for misleading federal agents when he answered questions to them about whether or not he had leaked sensitive information 3 or 4 times to the media. Here now, Byron York, chief political correspondent for the Washington Examiner and a Fox News contributor. Byron, good evening. Good to see you tonight. Thanks for being with us. The significance of the questions that they are likely asking James Comey about this.
Well, it's kind of a he said situation here. Basically, what it appears to be is Andrew McCabe is saying to Comey, you knew I was going to leak. I told you. You said it was okay. And Comey is saying, no, I didn't. Now, the one thing we don't really know is what kind of evidence might support this one way or the other. We're waiting for this Inspector General report and waiting and waiting. Thought it might have been released yesterday or today, is not. Now think it might be next week.
Now, the story is that they're redacting in the committee, in the House committee, right? And that, so that looks like potentially next week.
Well, what had happened, I mean, after this is released, the Inspector General Michael Horowitz is going to testify in front of the Senate Judiciary Committee. And the Senate Judiciary Committee had scheduled a hearing for next Tuesday, June 5th, because they thought it was going to come out. And now they've had to reschedule that for June 11th because they think it will come out then. But it is clearly being held up by redactions, by privacy concerns, and by, frankly, I think by feet being dragged at various places in the bureaucracy.
Interesting. You know, I guess when they're questioning James Comey about whether or not Andrew McCabe felt that he had the okay from higher ups to get some of this information out to the press, I would imagine that this soundbite from James Comey's testimony himself is going to come up. Let's play it.
I asked a friend of mine to share the content of the memo with a reporter. Didn't do it myself for a variety of reasons, but I asked him to because I thought that might prompt the appointment of a special counsel. Because I was worried the media was camping at the end of my driveway at that point, and I was actually going out of town with my wife to hide, and I worried it would be like feeding seagulls at the beach.
Remarkable.
Pretty hard to condemn leaks when you've done that, as a matter of fact. That was Comey saying that at least one or more of these so-called Comey memos, those 7 memos that he wrote about his interactions with President Trump, that he gave some of them to a friend, a Columbia University law professor named Daniel Richman, for the express purpose of Richman leaking that to the New York Times.
All right. Kimberly Strassel wrote a piece today, and you know all of this gets it gets very tangled. All these stories, right? But the point of this is that the FBI, the investigators have said that George Papadopoulos' discussion in Australia was one of the reasons that they started the investigation, right? And they said it wasn't just the dossier, it was also this, you know, conversation that George Papadopoulos had. So that's why she's breaking this down. Let's put this up on the screen. She writes, for months, we've been told that the FBI acted because it was alarmed that Mr. Papadopoulos knew about the hacked Democratic emails in May, before they became public in June, which everyone remembers. But according to the tipster himself, that her reporting revealed, Mr. Papadopoulos, when he spoke about this, never said anything about emails. He talked about, well, they might have some dirt on Hillary Clinton, but he was not talking specifically about emails or thousands of emails that had been found. That's a pretty big difference, isn't it?
Yeah, this is really fascinating. The scenario was that a man named Downer, who was the top Australian diplomat in London, had reached out to George Papadopoulos, as Papadopoulos, a low-ranking sort of volunteer member of the Trump Foreign Policy Advisory Team, reaches out. They meet, and you know the story is Papadopoulos is drunk, and he tells Downer about the Russians have all these emails from Hillary Clinton. They might drop them in the campaign. Well, what has happened is Downer has returned to Australia and gave a long interview to The Australian, the publication down there, and basically said, well, nobody was drunk. There was one drink consumed that wasn't a drunk thing, and he never talked, Papadopoulos, didn't talk about emails. So this has really raised a bunch of questions about the story of how this investigation has started. And by the way, no person in official position has come out and just told this story. This was leaked to the Washington Post, the New York Times earlier, and now we're getting new information about what those leaks were about.
Yeah, I mean, if they lose the Papadopoulos part of the story, that's problematic. I mean, the underpinning kind of starts to fall out, because then you're left with the dossier and potentially, you know, some concerns that they had about Carter Page, right?
Yeah, the Papadopoulos story basically was leaked as a way to knock down the dossier story, because there were a lot of people writing, wow, did the FBI start this investigation because of the dossier, which hasn't been confirmed? And then the leak was, no, they did not. It was because of Papadopoulos.
Yeah, I mean, you've done such brilliant reporting on all of this, Byron, and Kim Strassel has too. Thanks for all your hard work. Good to see you tonight.
Thank you, Martha.
All right, so coming up, the State Department tells David Bossie, don't worry, the Freedom of Information request that you put in, it's going to be ready in 40.
So being here feels like she's still kind of here with me. So when I'm leaving, I'm going to feel like there's nowhere I could go back to where we were together. That last time.
24/7 at Channel 115.
The failures of the government at every level continue to come to light when it comes to the killings at Douglas High School in Parkland, Florida. Paramedics revealing that they tried to get into the building six times rather, but they were held back by the Broward Sheriff's Office during the crucial minutes when students' lives may have been saved. This comes days before the seniors there will receive their diplomas, and they all have stories to tell. We went down to Stoneman Douglas and talked to two young women who lost their best friend, Meadow Pollock.
February 14th, I actually was on the opposite side of school. I was in my law class, and we were actually studying a case like this and all this stuff. So the fire alarm went off, and we actually evacuated the school.
I was in
Stoneman Douglas High in the town of Parkland. It's like a bad dream you want to wake up from.
Then I heard like very loud gunshots, but I thought it was a drill. Like no one ever thought that this would ever happen at Douglas.
I had to go and talk to the FBI for reason. I walked out with Nicholas Cruz. I was actually on the phone with my mom trying to find Meadow, and he was right behind me.
Stoneman Douglas High School has been under lockdown after reports of an active shooter situation.
I actually wasn't getting Meadow to answer my calls. I was freaking out. She wasn't answering, but I knew Meadow. She's one of the strongest people I know, that nothing would ever happen to her. Like, no way ever would it be her. I tracked her phone and it was at Douglas. I just expected the worst.
I called every single person I knew. The only person I didn't hear from was Meadow. She always will be the strongest person I know, so I knew there was no way she wouldn't go without a fight.
Inside a Florida high school, as an expelled former student unleashed a killing spree. At least 17 people are dead.
I don't even know how to move forward from it. I'm just thinking that Meadow would be the one to say, Carly, keep going, and don't give up.
Seeing all the people, even if it was people I didn't like or people I liked in the same situation as me, having to do that and sit there and all of that, like, just really, I looked at them and we hugged. There was no hate anymore. There was nothing. We cried together. We sat there together, and it just really showed me, like, wow, like, we're finally coming together. Like, it's so sad it had to be over this, but it's really helped us out, all of us, a lot, getting through it because we have each other.
So now we're here for each other, like no tomorrow. Graduation, I think, is going to be the hardest. Prom was hard, but graduation was Meadow's thing. It was walking that stage, and so now I will be putting on my cap, like a picture of her, to make sure that she is walking that stage with me, because this is her big day. So it's both our big days. She will still be there with us.
I'm doing my cap for Meadow with a picture of her, and the quote's going to be, "When I look up, I see you." We actually have a tattoo together that me and Carly both got together, and we swore we would never get a tattoo, but it is on her left ankle so she can walk that stage with us.
Nothing will ever be normal in these high schools, but everyone's got to keep on going, and the sports, like everyone being together as a team, is completely, it's needed. Everyone needs to be together. If we don't have each other, then we're never going to get through this, and we'll never get to fix it.
Really happy with how the school has come together and been there for each other when we need each other the most.
There's no stopping. Life keeps going on. Live it for her.
Joined now by Meadow Pollock's dad, Andrew Pollock. I'm so emotional watching your daughter's friends. I can only imagine what it's like for you, Andrew.
I can't tell you how angry and upset I am today. I'm having a rough day with this graduation that's going to go on tomorrow, and I wasn't prepared to hear all that stuff about my daughter, but it just, I'm angry with all this incompetence that my daughter's not going to be getting her diploma tomorrow, and it's my son that's going to have to get it on that stage. So it's tough.
I can imagine. And we all just give you so much credit for how strong you've been. And obviously it's going to be a very hard day. And you listen to her friends who I'm sure you're all
They're
close
great
to,
kids.
and they're great kids. They are really great kids, and everybody is proud of them. But your daughter should be on that stage. And the story that I mentioned on the way in here about the paramedics, and you know, I talked to Governor Rick Scott yesterday or the day before about what's being done in Florida to make sure this never happens again. And there is legislation that you worked very hard to pass. But, you know, you have to ask yourself, like, what happened at the Broward Sheriff's Office when they're not letting the paramedics in? And now we know that that guy was out of the building sometime before that, right?
Yeah, well, they couldn't let him in because they thought that, you know, the one deputy that worked at the school didn't go in. So he hid behind the wall, and they thought that there still was an active shooter in there because he was still hiding behind the wall, the deputy that was at the building at the time. So, you know, the paramedics, they had their work cut out for them that day because the sheriff at the school didn't do his job. And a lot of other people didn't do their jobs either, Martha. They have monitors at that school. An article came out today about a monitor that works at that school that didn't do his job either. He saw a gentleman, 1958, walk off out of a car onto the school ground with a rifle bag and didn't call a code red or call the police. He didn't call the police after he heard gunshots. So it's just another level of incompetence at that school. And that gentleman still works at the school and has his job.
You're
so
kidding
it was
me.
pretty upsetting with seeing that. Yeah, he's still at the school. No accountability for not calling the police, just getting on a radio after hearing gunshots.
Unreal.
If you read the article that came out today, it is unreal. And it's upsetting. And that's every day there's another article coming out. There's a video game, then there's a video on a phone. You know, so all the families, every day they're reliving something new. And this weekend it happens to be graduation.
I'm so sorry. You know, there was a moment at the White House. I know you went to that first gathering right after the shooting, and you were so strong standing there with your sons and talking to President Trump. Here's what happened at the White House press briefing this week.
One thing that affects mine and other students' mental health is to worry about the fact that we or our friends could get shot at school. Specifically, can you tell me what the administration has done and will do to prevent these senseless tragedies?
I think that as a kid and certainly as a parent, there is nothing that could be more terrifying for a kid to go to school and not feel safe. So I'm sorry that you feel that way. This administration takes it seriously, and the School Safety Commission that the president convened is meeting this week.
You can hear her get emotional when she responds to that little child, and I'm just curious what you think about how the White House is doing on what, you know, you were promised so far.
Well, I could tell you that the president did listen and he put a commission together. But talk is cheap right now in this country. I'm tired of hearing talk. I'm tired of roundtables. We need metal detectors and armed guards at the school. It doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure out that any kid could walk into a school any day of the week with a weapon, a knife, a hatchet, a gun. So how are our kids safe without metal detectors and single entry points?
Understood.
So that's what we need, Martha, and I laid it out on my plan, americansforclass.org.
Americansforclass.org. We urge everybody to go there, and we want to continue to be helpful in any way we can. Andrew, thank you. We'll be thinking about you this weekend.
Thank you, Martha.
Everybody at home, we'll be right back. Has been notoriously slow in fulfilling Freedom of Information Act requests, also known as FOIA requests. It's a way for citizens to know more about what the government's doing, and it's their right to know it because they pay for all the people who produce all that stuff. The current backlog at state, get ready for this, is 11,000 requests. And the average response time for those complex requests was just 650 days in 2017, which would put you deep into another year. So when David Bossie, president of Citizens United, filed a FOIA request regarding the Obama State Department's potential relationship with Christopher Steele and Fusion GPS, here's what he got in return. Quote from his editorial today. State Department says it will take 45 to 65 years to get me the info on his role in the 2016 election. So what is the rush? Here now, Tammy Bruce, president of the Independent Women's Voice, and Fox News contributor, and Philippe Reines, who is former senior advisor to Hillary Clinton. Philippe, let me start with you. 45 to 65 years. In other words, don't call us, we'll call you.
Well, you got to give them points for honesty. I mean, if they were trying to be deceptive, they would be a little less stupid. I worked in the State Department for 4 years, and I can tell you that there's no one, or maybe second to David Bossie, there's no one more appalled by that, by people who work at State, for a couple of reasons. One is it takes a lot of manpower away from other things. And I think that's what Rex Tillerson found last year. And, it's been 15 months under a Republican Secretary of State. They're realizing that this is a bureaucratic issue, not a political issue.
A bureaucratic issue. That it's going to take 45 to 65 years. I would say that that's bureaucratic paralysis.
Well, that defines the government. I mean, I think Tammy can speak to that. That's your government, unfortunately. But it's possible that our federal government is large and slow and inept and not necessarily evil. The problem is also the reason that David had to take his stuff to court is because if you send something now, if you send in a FOIA request now, you're number 11,001. When he goes to court, it's to move him to the front of the line. And some of these FOIA requests are crazy. And to the State Department's credit, you could go online and see every single one of them.
But what's crazy is that, an American citizen has to basically go to court. If you want your FOIA request to get heard from the bureaucratic institutions that you pay for, you pay all of those salaries, you pay for that building, you pay for the heat, you pay for the light, but you're going to have to also pay for a lawyer if you want to get this information out of the institution that is supposed to serve you, Tammy.
Yeah. And look, it's one thing if it really was a backlog. I know it's a lot of material and it's a lot of requests, but we'll recall back in 2016 when Hillary sent in all of those printed out emails, and the argument was from the State Department, well, look, we've got to look through all of these. It's going to take years before we're going to be able to get them to you. Yes, then they went to court, and a judge ordered them to do it immediately and to release them in batches. And strangely, somehow, they were able to move it more quickly with the manpower that they had, and it was clearly a high priority.
That's not true.
They weren't putting it back at the back of the line. It was a serious request, and so when a court does intervene, suddenly there's some magical framework. This is about, I think, a government, and I think we all can agree, that isn't interested in being transparent, and no matter who the president is. And so this is the argument about what the swamp is and what the priorities are. And I remember when Barack Obama ran in 2008, a big issue was transparency and about being responsive to the citizen. Americans care about that across the board. And this is, you're right, it's 45 to 65 years. It's like poking you in the eye with a finger. They mean to mock us with these requests.
I just want to point out what he was asking for, because I think it's relevant to this story. They're asking for, I think, 3 to 4 months of Victoria Nuland. She was a high-level State Department official in the Obama administration. They're asking for 3 or 4 months of her emails. It shouldn't be that hard to find that. They want to know if she at any time reached out to Christopher Steele. Was there any sort of business relationship between the Obama administration and the folks that were doing this intel research, Oppo research on Hillary Clinton's campaign? It shouldn't be that hard to find a few months of emails from not that long ago.
Yeah, but in David's op-ed, he writes himself that was submitted only 6 months ago into the Rex Tillerson State Department. I don't have any reach into the State Department. There's nothing holding these up except for it just taking a lot. David Bossie can't file something on October 1st and it suddenly go to number 1 in line. So again, when they go to court, they go to skip the line. And I'm fine with that because I've seen the line, and the line is a lot of people saying.
But he's not caring about there being a delay, Philippe. It's about 45 to 65 years.
I mean,
that was the problem. It's not like a year.
It won't.
Or 10 months.
I'm not defending that.
Half
it's
a century.
Silly.
Would you agree it's an insult? It's a deliberate insult to tell you to go take a hike.
It is not a deliberate insult.
Oh,
no.
come on.
Years.
It is
if
not.
someone told you, you know what, we're going to give you, come to DMV, we're going to have your license ready in 45 to 65 years. I mean, wouldn't you kind of take it personally?
But you know what? The DMV would tell you that. The DMV would tell you that because they don't care.
But even they don't.
Because they have their job whether you get it or not.
How ridiculous this whole process is. You drive up and down the street in Washington, D.C.
Something can be ridiculous and honest at the same time.
No, but it's bad. It's inexcusably bad, and that's the problem. No company in America would tell you that it would take 650 days to get something
But can
done.
I give you an example?
Very
My
quick.
email was
Please.
FOIA'd by Gawker in 2012. It took 3 years to produce it, 80,000 pages. You know why? Because someone's got to read every single page. If I emailed Tammy and said, do you want to get lunch? And she says, sure, call me on my cell. Someone's got to sit there and black that out. It's a ridiculous process.
Depends
It
if
is
you've got the
tedious.
staff to do it like the government does.
It's pretty amazing
not that
given
Tammy-
all
well,
of the technology that we have at our fingertips.
Luckily, Tammy
that you
did not
have
ask
to,
me to
that there's
lunch, so
somebody
there's no
saying they can't do a
backlash.
search and find all of the stuff that's not going
like
to be relevant.
1943.
But you want them to
Write it
drop
down at the
everything.
desk.
You want them to drop a Tom Fitton Judicial Watch request from 2 months earlier than that? I mean, this is all whack-a-mole.
Whack-a-mole. Thanks, you guys. Good to see you. We'll keep whacking
good
them.
weekend.
And we'll be here.
Thanks, you guys. So coming up next, a controversial government practice that cost one man nearly $60,000, most of his life savings. This is unreal. His son is here to explain why the federal government took his cash and says it's now legally theirs and won't give it back. And you know what? It happens a lot. An American citizen robbed blind by our own federal government. 64-year-old Rustim Kazazi had more than $58,000, his entire life savings, confiscated by U.S. Customs at the Cleveland airport. It was the result of a controversial practice that is called civil asset forfeiture. He still doesn't have the money back, despite never being charged with any crime in any of this. Trace Gallagher is live in our West Coast newsroom tonight to explain. Hi, Trace.
Hi, Martha. Here's how prevalent civil asset forfeiture is in the U.S. Last year, federal authorities seized more than $2 billion in assets. That's about the same amount that U.S. citizens lose in residential burglaries each year. But when the government takes your money and property, you don't have to be convicted of a crime or even charged with a crime. You simply have to be suspected of wrongdoing. For example, in the case of Rustim Kazazi, U.S. Customs and Border Protection believes he was involved in either smuggling, drug trafficking, or money laundering, though CPB has offered no evidence to support those allegations. The agency has released a statement saying that when Mr. Kazazi made his way through airport security in Cleveland, quoting, TSA agents discovered artfully concealed U.S. currency. Mr. Kazazi provided inconsistent statements regarding the currency, had no verifiable source of income, and possessed evidence of structuring activity. That's where you make deposits and withdrawals of less than $10,000 to avoid the banks from notifying the Department of Treasury. But the family says there was no artful deception. The money was wrapped in paper and placed in his carry-on, and that any inconsistent statements were because of his poor English. Kazazi is a retired police officer from Albania. He and his family came to the U.S. in 2005 through the Visa Lottery program and became U.S. citizens in 2010. Last fall, Kazazi planned a trip back to his home country to see family and potentially to buy a vacation home. He claims he took the $58,000 in cash because he does not trust the Albanian banking system. When he got to the airport in Cleveland, Kazazi says not only was his money confiscated, he was subjected to a humiliating strip search. But under asset forfeiture laws, it's incumbent upon Mr. Kazazi to prove that he's not up to something nefarious, which is why he has now filed a lawsuit to get back his $58,000.
Great story. Trace, thank you so much. So here now with more, Rustim's son, Errol Kazazi. Errol, thank you very much for being with us tonight. First of all, what was your dad doing with his entire life savings in his carry-on luggage?
He was planning on taking care of some problems with our former home in Albania that was in dire need of repairs. And him and my mother had always dreamed of purchasing a vacation home on the coast there, so they could vacation there when they retire.
So he's bringing all his money over. He's got it wrapped in paper in the bag. They say that it was concealed in an odd way, that they suspected that he might be guilty of some kind of smuggling.
Confusing. There's no evidence because none of that ever happened.
So what happened when he was talking to them? Because they say that he gave inconsistent statements, and that was what sort of opened the door for them to confiscate his money under what's known as civil asset forfeiture. And as you heard Trace Gallagher say, they've taken $2 billion that way recently.
I think what happened with them making the claims for inconsistent statements was maybe them not being able to understand his poor English. If they had bothered to contact a translator or even a family member, they could have tried reaching out to me or my mother so we could translate for him. They wouldn't have had any of those issues.
Did he request a translator?
Yes, he did several times.
It's unbelievable that he was denied. What is your family doing now? What's your legal recourse?
Right now, we filed a motion for return of property, and since CBP has missed their deadlines for court action, we're expecting the money back, but we haven't heard anything from them. They took the money in October 24th, 2017, and it's been a painful process to deal with since then.
Yeah, I can imagine. How frustrating has it been? Excuse me. How frustrating has it been trying to deal with the government, trying to tell them your story, and trying to make your case?
Oh, we tried reaching out to them in the beginning, and the only options they gave us were that you would receive a letter that would list 4 options, whether you choose to abandon the money, make an offer and compromise where you let them keep part of it. You could go through an administrative petition, which is the process that CBP does to negotiate with them, or you could request court action.
So what's the impact on your family of the loss of this money?
It's devastating. He had plans to for the home to make repairs in Albania. He had utilities and bills to pay over there. He wanted to look at a few homes on the Adriatic coast and decide which one to get for retirement, and he wasn't able to do any of that. What makes this even worse is we had relatives that would have needed help because they were having health issues, and he wasn't even able to help any of them. Instead, he had to ask relatives there to help him be able to afford food and health care while he was in Albania for 6 months without any of his life savings.
When do you expect to hear the next steps on this?
I'm hoping very soon. CBP has to return the money at this point. We've done nothing wrong.
Incredible.
And they can't. Yeah.
It's quite a story. Thank you very much for telling it to us, and we'll keep an eye on it. Let us know. Keep us updated, Errol, if you would. We'd appreciate it. Thank you very much for being here tonight.
Thank you.
You bet. All right, quick break, and quote of the night coming up next.